a thought experiment escaped the philosophy department and became a religion. It carries ancient DNA. We have examined two paths to the same suspicion. The Gnostics traveled by myth, built a cosmology from introspection, revelation, and felt the wrongness of existence. They concluded that this world was made by an ignorant creator, that something in us doesn't belong here, that knowledge, not faith, is the way through. Modern physics traveled by mathematics. It built a cosmology from accelerators, equations, and the refusal to accept any claim without empirical test. It concluded that matter dissolves into probability at small scales, that space-time may be emergent rather than fundamental, that our perceptions are evolutionary interfaces shaped for fitness rather than truth. Two paths, one destination. The world is not the ground floor, but there's a third path, newer, stranger, arising not from mystical tradition or physical experiment, but from pure logic. A thought experiment that escaped the philosophy department, infected the culture, and became something halfway between science and religion. The simulation argument. Nick Bostrom didn't intend to start a spiritual movement. He was doing philosophy in the analytic tradition, rigorous, formal, and concerned with logical structure rather than existential meaning. He published a paper. The paper went viral, slowly at first, then with increasing velocity as the culture caught up to its implications. The argument is simple. The conclusion is shattering. And the resonance with Gnostic cosmology is too precise to ignore. In 2003, Nick Bostrom, then at Yale, published Are You Living in a Computer Simulation? In Philosophical Quarterly. The paper runs about 20 pages. Its core argument fits in a paragraph. Here it is. Assume that civilizations can reach technological maturity, a level of development at which computing power is essentially unlimited. Assume that some fraction of mature civilizations would want to run ancestor simulations, detailed simulations of their evolutionary past, populated by conscious beings who don't know they're simulated. Assume that the number of such simulations would be large. If all three assumptions hold, then the number of simulated conscious beings vastly exceeds the number of non-simulated conscious beings. The ratio might be billions to one, trillions to one. It depends on how many simulations get run, and how many minds each simulation contains. If you're a conscious being, which presumably you are, or you wouldn't be watching this, and if the simulated vastly outnumber the real, then the odds are overwhelming that you are simulated. You are probably not at the base layer of reality. The argument depends on 3 propositions, exactly one of which must be true. First of all, almost all civilizations at our level of development go extinct before reaching technological maturity. This is the great filter hypothesis applied to simulation capability. Civilizations destroy themselves through nuclear war, engineered pandemics, AI catastrophe, resource exhaustion, or some unknown risk we haven't anticipated. The universe is littered with the ruins of species that didn't make it. And we won't make it either. The question of simulations doesn't arise because the simulators never exist. Second, almost all civilizations that reach technological maturity lose interest in running ancestor simulations. This is the convergence hypothesis. Perhaps something about technological maturity changes a civilization's values. Perhaps they become post-biological and their evolutionary past seems irrelevant. Perhaps they discover something about consciousness that makes simulating it impossible or unethical. Perhaps they just don't care. The capability exists, but the motivation doesn't. Third, we're almost certainly living in a simulation. If civilizations do survive to technological maturity, and if a significant fraction of them do run ancestor simulations, then the arithmetic is overwhelming. Each simulation might contain billions of conscious beings. Each advanced civilization might run millions of simulations. The simulated beings outnumber the real beings by many orders of magnitude. If you don't know which type you are, simulated or base reality, you should bet on the more common type. You are almost certainly a simulation. That is the trilemma. At least one of the 3 propositions must be true, but we don't know which. Most discussions of the simulation argument get stuck on whether it's possible to simulate consciousness. Could a computer really produce subjective experience? Isn't there something about neurons or quantum effects or the irreducibility of qualia that makes simulation impossible? These objections miss the structure of the argument. Bostrom is not claiming that simulated consciousness definitely exists. He is pointing out that if the first 2 propositions are false, if civilizations survive, and if they do run simulations, then the 3rd proposition follows with near certainty. The only way to avoid the conclusion is to accept one of the other 2 propositions. This means the simulation hypothesis doesn't stand alone. It comes as a package deal with 2 genuinely disturbing alternatives. We're almost certainly going to destroy ourselves before reaching technological maturity. Something about technological maturity makes ancestor simulations unappealing or impossible for almost everyone who achieves it. Neither alternative is comforting. The first suggests imminent extinction. The second suggests that our current values and interests are radically parochial. That mature intelligence loses interest in precisely the kinds of projects we currently find fascinating. The simulation hypothesis, strange as it is, might be the optimistic option. At least in that scenario, consciousness continues. Reality is deeper than we thought. There's more to explore. We're not about to wink out of existence. We already exist in a context larger than we imagined. But optimistic isn't the same as true. The honest answer is, we don't know which proposition is correct. We can't know from inside the argument. The simulation hypothesis doesn't have a probability of 0.99 or 0.01. It has a probability that depends on empirical questions we cannot currently answer. About the survival rate of civilizations, about the interest profiles of mature intelligences, about the nature of consciousness and computation. What we can say is that the probability is not trivially low. It's not a philosopher's game, a thought experiment to be smiled at and dismissed. It's a genuine possibility that we might be living in a constructed reality created by intelligence greater than ours, for purposes we cannot know. Bostrom is a careful, analytic philosopher. He was not doing theology. He was doing probability theory applied to future civilizations. And yet, the paper's reception revealed something about the cultural moment. When people encounter the simulation argument, they don't respond as they would to a typical philosophical thought experiment. They don't say, "How interesting, I'll file that with a trolley problem." No, they get excited, or unsettled, or oddly comforted. They start asking questions that sound more religious than philosophical. Why would they simulate us? What do they want? Can we contact them? Are there rules to the simulation? Can we cheat? Is there an afterlife, a post-simulation existence? Do our choices matter? These are not questions about computational theory. These are questions about meaning, purpose, salvation. The simulation hypothesis triggers religious intuitions even in people who have no religious beliefs. Why? Because the structure of the hypothesis is the structure of religion. There's a creator, the simulator, and there's a created order, the simulation. The created beings have limited access to truth about the situation. The creator's purposes are obscure. The created beings might or might not be able to transcend their condition. This is the Gnostic pattern in technological disguise. If we are in a simulation, someone or something built it. Call them simulators. What do we know about them? Almost nothing, and yet something. We know they have computational power beyond anything we currently possess. We know they have interest in running a simulation that includes beings like us, whether that interest is scientific, artistic, nostalgic, commercial, or entirely alien to our categories. We know they exist at a higher level of reality than we do. But we don't know if they're at the base layer. Here's where the Gnostic parallel sharpens. The Demiurge in Gnostic cosmology is a creator who doesn't know there's a higher reality. He looks at his creation and declares himself supreme. "I am God and there is no other," he says. His ignorance is structural. He cannot see past his limits, past his own context. The simulators might be in exactly this position. They are our creators, but they may themselves be simulated by a higher order of simulators, who may themselves be simulated, who may... Where does it end? The Demiurge is not the ultimate god, just the local one. The simulator is not the ultimate programmer, just the one running this instance. The hierarchy of creators extends upward, and we cannot see the top. This is nested demiurgy, gods all the way up, and every god a creature of the god above. But if reality is a simulation, then anomalies become meaningful in a new way. In a purely natural cosmos, governed by fixed physical laws, an anomaly is either a misperception or an unexplained phenomenon awaiting natural explanation. We see something strange, we assume we saw it wrong, or there's a mechanism we don't yet understand. The framework is closed. Nothing can happen that doesn't fit the framework. In a simulated cosmos, this changes. Simulations have glitches. Software has bugs. Rendering limits exist. The simulators might patch the system occasionally, creating discontinuities. They might run experiments within the simulation, temporarily altering parameters. Or they might debug. If you are looking for evidence that you are in a simulation, you might look for phenomena that don't fit the rules. Moments when physics doesn't behave as expected. Experiences that seem impossible within the normal architecture. Sound familiar? The phenomenon UAP, anomalous objects demonstrating capabilities that violate known physics, looks different through the simulation lens. Instead of being evidence of advanced alien technology or interdimensional intrusion, it might be evidence of a glitch, a rendering artifact, a debug operation, something leaking through from the development layer. I'm not claiming this is true, I'm claiming it's coherent. If the simulation hypothesis is on the table, then unexplained phenomena are not necessarily evidence of the unknown. They might be evidence of the constructed. The walls of the prison glimpsed momentarily before the patch is applied. The Gnostics would recognize this logic. For them, moments of gnosis, sudden insight into the nature of the prison, came through cracks in the Demiurge's architecture. The system isn't perfect. The truth leaks through. You can recognize the bars if you know how to look. In the simulation frame, bugs are revelations. Every glitch is a small apocalypse, or unveiling. Let's follow the logic where it leads. If we are in a simulation, our simulators have computational technology sufficient to create conscious beings within a computational substrate. This means we, if we survive long enough, will likely develop the same capability. We will run our own simulations. We will create our own universes populated with conscious beings who don't know they're in a simulation. And they will create theirs. This is not a two-level structure. It's a potentially infinite regress. Traditional metaphysics sought a foundation, some level of reality that just is, requiring no further explanation. God, or matter, or the fundamental laws of physics. Something that doesn't rest on anything else. The uncaused cause. The necessary being. The brute fact. The simulation hypothesis dissolves this. If every level of reality can be simulated by a higher level, then there is no obvious stopping point. Our simulators might be in someone else's simulation. That someone might be in yet another simulation. Each time you think you've found the ground moves. So, where's the base layer? There might not be one. This is a conceptual revolution. It means fundamental reality might be an incoherent concept. Not just unknown, but unknowable in principle. Because reality doesn't have a fundamental layer. It has layers all the way down. Or up. Direction metaphors become confused. We are nested in simulators who are nested in their simulators. There is no outside from which to view the whole structure. There is no architect's plan. There is only the local context which seems real because it's all we can access. The Gnostics had a version of this intuition. The Demiurge didn't create ex nihilo. from nothing. He created from Sophia's light, which came from the pleroma, which emanated from the One. But the One's nature is negative theology. You can only say what it isn't, not what it is. Is it the base layer? Or is the One itself arising from something deeper, something we have no name for? The Nag Hammadi texts gesture towards this apophatic abyss. The true God is beyond being, beyond naming, beyond any category we might apply. Not because God is mysterious, but because our concepts, including fundamental, might not reach that high. There's something terrifying about this vision, and something liberating. Terrifying because there's no ground to stand on. Every apparent floor is a ceiling for the level below. You can never find the real reality because the concept solves under investigation. And liberating because the absence of foundation means the absence of final constraint. If there's no base layer, there's no set of rules that is truly absolute. Every physics is a local physics. Every constraint is a constraint of this level, not all levels. The walls are real within the simulation, but the simulation has an outside. Even if that outside is itself inside another simulation. The Gnostic intuition was, the Demiurge's laws are not the true God's laws. You are subject to them here in this cosmos, but they do not define ultimate reality. They are local ordinances, not cosmic constitution. The simulation extension is, every set of laws is local. Every simulator imposes constraints on their simulation, but those constraints are arbitrary from a higher perspective. What seems physically necessary, the speed of light, the values of fundamental constants, the impossibility of violating thermodynamics, might be parameters that could have been set differently, that are set differently in other simulations, that a higher level being could modify at will. This is radical contingency. The rules of our own universe are not necessary truths. They are design choices. Whoever runs this simulation made decisions, conscious or arbitrary, optimized or random, that resulted in the specific physics we experience. Different decisions would have yielded different physics. Our physics is not the only possible physics. It's not even necessarily the preferred physics of our simulators. It might be a better version. It might be a dead-end branch. It might be scheduled for deletion. The Gnostics never used words like simulation or code or parameters, but their mythology captures the same structure. The Demiurge's laws are not the Pleroma's nature. What seems necessary here is contingent from there. The prison walls are real, but they are not reality. Before the simulation argument, many people assumed that if reality was a simulation, this would be bad news. Depressing. Nihilism-inducing. If nothing is real in the ultimate sense, what's the point? But that's not how people have actually responded. Something about the simulation hypothesis comforts a certain kind of modern person. Not everyone, not universally. But there's a notable subset who find the idea exciting rather than deflating. Who feel less alone rather than more. Who experience the possibility as meaning-enhancing rather than meaning-destroying. But why? Modern secular culture has a meaning problem. If the universe is just physics, matter and energy operating under impersonal laws, then consciousness is an accident. Human existence is a brief flicker between two eternities of non-existence. And nothing we do matters in any cosmic sense. We can construct meaning created from the whole cloth, but there's no meaning out there to be discovered. The universe doesn't care. It can't care. It's not the kind of thing that cares. This is the existentialist predicament. Sartre, Camus, the whole tradition of wrestling with absurdity. Life has no meaning except what we give it. This is either terrifying or liberating, depending on your temperament. But it's lonely. You're making up meaning in a cosmos that doesn't recognize it. The simulation hypothesis changes the equation. If we are in a simulation, there is a purpose built into our existence. The simulator's purpose. We don't know what it is. We might never know. But it's there. We were created intentionally for a reason. Our existence is not an accident of physics, but a consequence of will. This is not the same as the religious assurance that God loves you and has a plan for your life. The simulators might be running a physics simulation at scale, and you are an emergent byproduct they haven't noticed. Their purpose might be benevolent, malevolent, or entirely indifferent to categories we'd recognize. But it's still a purpose. There's still an intent behind the curtain. This is more than physics offers. Physics doesn't intend anything. Physics just is. There's also the contact question. If we're in a simulation, something intelligent made it. That something exists in a reality adjacent to ours, above us in the stack of reality layers. They are, in some sense, watching. Whether they are watching us specifically or just running the simulation and ignoring the details, they are there. We're not alone in the cosmos. It's not the same as discovering extraterrestrial life. Aliens, if they exist, are on our level. Other creatures within the simulation, subject to the same physics, facing the same questions about their own nature and origins. Finding them would be significant, but it wouldn't answer the ultimate questions. It would mean we have company in the prison. The simulators are different. They are outside our context. They presumably understand things we can't understand. They operate by rules we can't access. They have a perspective on our reality that we cannot share, the way an author has a perspective on a novel's characters that the characters cannot share. And yet, they made us. Something about conscious beings like us was interesting enough, or useful enough, or valuable enough that they expended resources to create us. We are, at minimum, not worthless to them. We are at least interesting enough to simulate. This might not sound like much, but compare it to the alternative, that we are an accident of chemistry on a random rock in an indifferent void. The simulators, even if they are running us as a subroutine in some larger computation, have granted us an ontological status that pure materialism can provide. We exist because something wanted us to exist. Now, the Gnostic resonance becomes acute. The Gnostics also found meaning in being created, but by the wrong creator. The Demiurge made this world, but the Demiurge is not the source of our deepest nature. The spark in us comes from somewhere else, from the pleroma, from a level of reality the Demiurge himself cannot perceive. We are valuable not because of this world, but despite it. We do not belong here, and precisely because we don't belong here, we have a link to something greater. Translate this into simulation logic. We were created by the simulators, but we contain something, consciousness, subjective experience, the spark, that might not be fully explicable by simulation mechanics. we might be more than our substrate. If consciousness is fundamental rather than emergent, then the simulation contains something it didn't entirely create. The Demiurge didn't create the sparks, he captured them. The simulators might be in the same position. They wrote the code, but something, the capacity for experience itself, may pre-exist the code, may exceed the code, may not be fully reducible to the computational substrate. Of course, this is wildly speculative, but it's the same kind of speculation the Gnostics engaged in. They asked, what in us is not of this world? What survives the prison? What is the key to escape? If the simulation is the prison, what is the spark that doesn't belong to the simulation? And what happens to it when the simulation ends? We should be careful here. The simulation argument is a piece of logic. It shows that one of the three propositions must be true. It does not tell us which proposition is true. It does not provide evidence for the simulation hypothesis over the alternatives. And the logic has assumptions that can be questioned. Assumption 1. Consciousness can be simulated. This is not obvious. The hard problem of consciousness remains unsolved. We don't know whether a sufficiently detailed information processing system would automatically be conscious, or whether consciousness requires something physical processes can provide. Some primitive, irreducible property of the universe that doesn't transfer to simulations. If consciousness can't be simulated, the argument collapses. Civilizations might run ancestor simulations, but those simulations would contain philosophical zombies rather than genuine conscious beings. The population of simulated conscious beings might be 0, not vastly exceeding the base reality population. Assumption 2. We can reason about this topic at all. If we are in a simulation, our reasoning processes are themselves part of the simulation. The simulators could, in principle, make us conclude anything they want us to conclude. Our sense that the simulation argument is compelling might be a design feature, not a reflection of truth. We have no way to verify that our logic is reliable from outside our context. This is a deeper skepticism than Descartes' demon. Descartes at least had the cogito, I think, therefore I am. He found one fixed point. The simulation hypothesis questions whether even that is fixed. Perhaps I think is a simulated process whose apparent self-certainty is part of the programming. Assumption 3. The concept of almost all is coherent across infinitely many simulations. If the regress is truly infinite, simulations within simulations without end, then the mathematical treatment of probability becomes tricky. What does it mean for almost all conscious beings to be simulated, if both the simulated and the non-simulated populations are infinite? The probability calculus that makes Bostrom's argument work might break down at infinite scales. These are not trivial objections. They are not meant to dismiss the argument, but to situate it properly. The simulation hypothesis is not established fact. It's not even a scientific hypothesis in the testable sense. It's a possibility, a live possibility with genuine probability mass that we cannot currently exclude. What we can say is that the simulation framework is isomorphic with the Gnostic framework. If you accept the simulation hypothesis as even possibly true, you have accepted that this world might not be ultimate reality. The creator of this world might not be the ultimate creator, and that something in us might not belong to this world. understanding our true situation might be the key to something. Liberation, access, contact. Those are the Gnostic claims, translated into technological vocabulary. The Gnostics were mystics, using myth to articulate their sense that reality was not as presented. Bostrom is a philosopher, using probability theory to articulate a structural possibility about nested creation. They are not the same. Their methods differ, their cultural contexts differ, their implications for practice differ, but they point at the same shape. The shape is, we might be inside something. Something might be outside. The boundary might not be impermeable. The rules here might not be the rules there. The prison whispers to the prisoners. In Gnostic myth, the whisper came through revelation, through secret teaching, through the moment of gnosis when the spark remembered its origin. In simulation logic, the whisper comes through glitches, through anomalies, through phenomena that don't fit the physics and refuse to be explained away. The phenomenon. We're almost ready to face it directly. But first, we should examine what the simulation hypothesis implies about escaping the construct. If the walls are code, what does hacking look like?